Okay, this is basically part 2 of a video we shot earlier. I have Roane on the camera again, where we talk about basically mixing substrate and setting up an enclosure for a moisture-dependent species. The one in this instance, with the dogs clicking in the background, is my stirmi. It's one I bought as a 1.25-inch sling, inch and a quarter sling, and it's now quite large, probably about 4.5 inches or so. I'm not quite sure, and I don't like exaggerating the size, but they're growing very, very quickly. This one I did sex out the molt recently, but for the last molt, and it does appear to be male. The other one appears to be a female. So this guy's going to be getting a new enclosure now because after this recent molt, this one's definitely too small. This is a species that has some pretty miserable urticating hairs, so I am going to throw on the gloves for this, and I do have on long sleeves. After I end up getting this guy out of the enclosure, one thing to remember when working with species that have urticating hairs is that they lay those hairs all over the substrate in the enclosure, so you want to be very careful when working with them. Also, if it's a drier enclosure, this one's a little moisture, those hairs can be, forced in the air by breathing on them or by any airflow. So, for example, during the summer, I went to rehouse one, and the fan was on above the table I was working on, and I probably kicked up some hairs that way. So I'm going to try to be very careful. We're going to try to cup this guy very quickly, get him in his new home. When I do my transfers, I try to be as quick as possible to avoid any issues, and I try to keep them from kicking the hairs. It's sometimes impossible, but for some of the species, if you can grab them quick, you don't have a chance to freak out and react. So we're gonna get this guy right in here. Yank this out of the way. And again, there's hairs all over the place in here. When I dispose of this, it will go in basically a compost pile where I put all my stuff. Guys, stop. And dogs are getting into it in the background. Come on, buddy. No, and there's the hair kicking. All right, so I'm going to lay down a little bit. Try to move them over on the cardboard. Try not to get his leg in there. And what I usually try to do is point him right into the burrow. Sometimes I'll go right in. Roane, I want you to be ready to back up a little bit if he starts kicking again, because I don't want you to get haired. You don't have to do it yet. It's fine. All right, and cardboard's out. And we're just going to keep the hair in there. Now, one thing to remember when you do rehousings, and they kick hair into one of these things, you want to make sure I'm going to take this outside afterwards with the gloves on, wash it out completely with water, because those hairs will linger on it. And basically the only time I actually got haired was after the fact when I was playing around with one of these cups. Didn't realize it was one that something had kicked into, and it was a GBB, and I got the hairs all on my fingers, which is basically the only time I've ever really had an issue with it. So we're going to go ahead and let this out. This is ideally how I want it to work. And I'm going to take all this stuff, if you want to put it over here for a second. This stuff's going to all get closed off so I can go out later outside and hose it all down to keep the hairs out. This container will get reused, but first things first, I got to get all the hairs on. So there we go. That's my male stirmi. I'm going to take the camera from Roane in a second. Hopefully we don't get kicked, but there he is in there. Beautiful guy. I've had a lot of luck with these guys not kicking, so I'm kind of proud of that fact. I try not to irritate them very much because I've heard these guys can kick hairs all the time. I don't blame him for kicking the air because that was a little disruptive to his process. So we're going to let this guy acclimate to his new enclosure. I did just feed him a huge dubia roach right before last night before we went and attempted this rehousing, because I wanted him to be nice and fattened up, because sometimes it takes a little while for them to settle in. All right, so there's my stirmi juvenile male, all rehoused, and my yellow lab is going to be put outside a minute because she's driving me nuts.